All right, the main event. This is the event that you've all been waiting for, talking about resilient and secure health systems. I think this is one of the most important topics that the GBA conference is going to cover over this two-day span. The people here on this panel are my friends and colleagues and have some really passionate and informed decisions on the challenge of resilient healthcare systems and what that means to us, and especially in the conjunction of blockchain technology. So let's just get right into it. I think we've done some of the introductions. The very first question that I have, well, let me start with a disambiguation. When we're speaking about health systems, the definition ranges from physical and technical infrastructure and logistics to caregiver rosters and data systems, pharmaceutical delivery systems, and on and on. So when the panelists are stating their views, they'll try to do their best to talk about what part of a health system they're talking about, or you know, what it's contrived of. But just understand that this is a huge topic. We could have had 2 days just on this. So the first question that I have is, what does resilience mean? What constitutes a resilient, secure healthcare system? And this is kind of a jump off for everybody. I'd like to start with Pradeep Goel, if you have some thoughts, and then we can just kind of go down the line. What does resilience mean?
Well, first, thank you for having me, and many thanks to Kathy and Gerard for doing an incredible job of putting this event together. And we are always honored to be part of this. And thank you, Marky, for
Absolutely.
The opportunity. And the panel is amazing, so I'm looking forward to talking to you all. Good to see you, Heather. It's been a while. So to answer the question about resilient, it is going to depend upon the context, but in the most fundamental sense is to be able to deliver continuity of care to patients in all scenarios, and to be able to be sure that that continuity of care is of a quality that is necessary for the situation. So first thing is we need to make sure that regardless of geopolitical or geographic calamities, which we see very frequently now, how do we make sure people can still get to care? Because the fundamental axiom of healthcare is delayed care is denied care. You know, the care need geometrically increases if you wait 1 day more than you should have waited. And the cost goes up geometrically as well. So any delay in care is effectively a denied care model. So we need to focus on resiliency of access. And a very simple example is COVID, right? A lot of people delayed essential care because it was not available, or they were afraid of going to the hospital, or all our attention was focused on one single condition. That doesn't mean that people's hearts suddenly repaired itself or leukemia cured itself. It didn't happen. But all those delays led to a very poor outcome, and we have a huge backlog, a demographic backlog that we will pay for the next 20 years because we delayed that care for 2 years. And you can expect a 10 times exponentially bigger backlog, which won't manifest itself tomorrow, but it will manifest itself over the trend line. So resiliency of healthcare ultimately from a patient point of view is access to care. And an equivalent counterparty is the provider. Resilience of healthcare from a provider point of view is the ability to deliver care. And if you impair that, then the physician can't do their job. And once you impair the delivery of care, you have a very large seismic effect that comes from that, because every primary care physician on average serves 2,000 plus patients. So one physician going out of service is impacting 2,000 plus people, and then their families. So that's the resiliency of healthcare at the very fundamental level that I have experienced.
That's important to emphasize. Every one physician is responsible, generally speaking, for about 2,000 people. So when we lose one physician, I mean, it's a definite impact. Frank, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, it's hard to add to that, but
yeah, right. That's a lot. That's a lot.
I'm just going to really reemphasize a couple things. It's access and availability. Mm-hmm. So access is important. You know, that's independent of, you know, is care available, or is there enough care providers available? You know, several hundred million people around the world just don't have access to basic health care at all, just at all. And, you know, and what we're seeing as well is that as a lot of the engagement models, start incorporating more virtual models or pushing things out to at home or, mobile therapeutics, the whole aspect of digital access becomes very important. So I think the broader access model also has to include kind of digital access or access to digital services. And then availability. I think Pradeep mentioned docs, but let's take another example of the health workforce, which is important, which is nurses. And I think nurses are a backbone of our healthcare and health delivery ecosystem. We're going to be 5 million nurses short worldwide. And in some regions, you're talking about one nurse to pushing 100,000 people in ratio. That's a lot, right? That means they don't have availability of healthcare. And just in the US, 500,000 nurses are going to retire. We're going to be over 1 million nurses short. And what you're seeing is now this whole disruption because of COVID in what happened in mobility and how agencies took over. So nurses figured out, hey, I can sign up with an agency and get paid a lot more, which now put economic pressure on a lot of these facilities, which means a lot of rural facilities shut down. And so you see this propagation. So I think, when you're talking about resiliency, it comes down to fundamentals. It's access and availability in all forms of access and availability.
Yeah, access is definitely one of those foundational threads in what a resilient system is all about. Ellen, I know you've got some thoughts on this. We've talked about some of this.
Sure.
Is your mic working?
Hi, my name is Ellen. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the last presentation. And of course, thanks to Gerard and Kathy and the entire GBA family. This is a great opportunity because you've moved blockchain into this talking point at cocktail parties to infrastructure, which is the most important when it comes, of course, that I can think about. But coming down to resiliency, I see resiliency as an opportunity for similar to business continuity. It is very, very critical for us to see resiliency and security in terms of how we implement business continuity in business. Because all of the points that Pradeep and Frank brought together are things that we have to think about for the future state. And if we don't have a business continuity model built into our infrastructure, we're going to have a lot of problems in the future. The good news is that we had COVID, so we have had lots of lessons learned in order to build that. In businesses or in corporations, we talk about disaster recovery. That is after the fact. But smart people normally put together a business continuity plan. And in this case, it's life continuity, health continuity, people continuity, and economic continuity. So I'm so happy we're talking infrastructure because it comes down to all of us understanding how to apply those use cases in technology. People talk about blockchain, and I was on the Amtrak on Sunday. This very, very eloquent developer, she said, Ellen, I know about blockchain, I don't understand it. I'm trying to. Isn't that a database? So people are still thinking about it that way, but when you begin to match up infrastructure and use cases, you get it. That's all I have to say.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. So we're touching on access. We're talking about the sustainability of a solid technical system that's disaster resistant and so forth. Heather, what do you think? What does resiliency in a healthcare system really mean?
Thank you, Marquis.
Yeah.
And can I just say, piling on with Gerard, can this man rock a bow tie? I mean, really.
Hell yeah, he can
so-
rock a bow tie.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for moderating,
Yes.
and to my esteemed co-panelists, it's
Thank
great
you.
to see
Yeah.
see you again. For me, I think what I'd like to add to the discussion so far is the concept of adaptability and flexibility in our definition of resilience. If we were to imagine together our health system as a complex adaptive system, and then you were to have some way of quantifying or measuring, well, how adaptive is it really? You would get into all of the points of brittleness that come at the connective tissue between different stakeholder categories, enterprises, public and private, the family, the community, the individual, the provider. So we look at organizational change management generally inside the four walls of one agency, of one enterprise. We will think about adapting communities in a very narrow sense. Adaptability is now possible through mutualized and federated blockchain ecosystems that introduces a possibility for human health that has never existed before. This notion of resilience can be brought about because we can abstract up outside of the four walls of N agencies, enterprises, rule sets that work and optimize at an ecosystem level. We then can implement controls to audit and oversee those things. We will have unintended consequences no matter how deliberate we are about being ethically intentional. That need for adaptability and accelerating change is absolutely critical to prevent the same kinds of unintended consequences we've had in previous paradigms of technological advancement. So a resilient health system is one that is adaptable, that can become as close to self-aware and thought of as an organism in and of itself. And the infrastructure that can facilitate that are mutualized and federated new blockchain-based ecosystems. So I think that focusing on change and acceleration of change while also having guardrails that can control for unintended consequences is really at the heart of it.
Yeah. Resilience and adaptability seem like they kind of go hand in hand, right? Thank you, Heather. Dr. Gary, Zach, you've been on the front lines for a long time, managing the teams that implement systems, and you have a very specific perspective on resilient healthcare systems. What do you think about that?
Well, first, thank you for allowing me to join this panel.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll give my opinion from a user perspective, from a patient being in the OR on the operating table, and how do we build resilience into the system using this technology for a specific case. I've observed hundreds of surgeries, trauma surgeries with orthopedic surgeons. A lot of times they have the implants right there ready to be implanted, and it's not the right implant, or maybe there's a screw missing. And right away they have to look in their inventory, look into the system, see if they have one on the shelf. And when they go down to get the device, it's not there, but there's 5 in the system. They're somewhere else at another facility. So, blockchain, if everything's connected and there's integrity and trust in that system, you could distribute those products and those implants more effectively across the system. Now, what happens in a case like this? Well, the patient's cut open, patient's under anesthesia. Patient needs to, they're not going to close the patient up and wait, oh, we'll do the surgery tomorrow. It's going to happen. So your cost will increase, of course, because your patient is on that table waiting for that device to get the right device.
Yeah, costs will increase, the risk to the patient, right.
Exactly. So I've seen this happen time and time again, and these physicians come to me because I'm in IT, please help me. They're asking me, please help me. Please help me be a better doctor. Help me be a better physician. And what they need is the data. They need this accessibility to data. They need the analytics. They need access to these databases and to these analytics so they can make better decisions and build resilience into the system. Because what are we here for in healthcare? For the outcome, for the best outcome possible. And that's our goal. And that's where I believe we could use technology like this to build this resilience.
Yeah, that's a good point. Accurate redundancies, dependable information, that's the stuff of resiliency that you're talking about. Yeah,
Absolutely.
right on. These are really useful context points to keep in mind when we talk about resilience in healthcare, because everybody in this room has been or is going to be in our healthcare system, and it's important to figure this out. So when we talk about resilient in healthcare or I'm sorry, resilient, secure health systems. In your opinion, esteemed panel, what are the key components of a system, and we know they can be varied and disparate, that need to be appropriately managed? The key components of a resilient health system that need to be managed so that you're sure that it's resilient. Ellen, I'd like to start with you because we've had some conversations.
Great. Through my research and understanding technology architecture, there are, normally you'll say people, process, and technology and be done with it. And then at a certain time, we talk about compliance and regulation built on top of that. But there are 6 key components that I've come up with, and of course, not me, but the world. We talk about a healthy workforce. And what do we mean? I think my colleague talked about nurses and doctors and having those individuals. And if you were architecting or you were working on a strategy, an infrastructure for blockchain and security, you will consider that in your documentation or your strategy. Then you have service delivery, that's logistics. Telemedicine, medical devices, and those pieces have to be delivered to the end user or the end doctor to be able to do the surgery. Then you have the health information system. Imagine having, he talked about blockchain. You know that health information system, and it's not just the blockchain technology. We are talking about, I mean, we can call it digital twin, we can call it mesh, but if you understand the technology as an infrastructure, you understand there are a couple of other technologies under AI that we will need to implement to make this beautiful blockchain work perfect, right? And that's a combination of maybe AI, ML, sensors, and other devices within the architecture design. Then we have financing. Yesterday, we had somebody here from Congress, and they spoke about the probability of a public, I mean, personally, I think about a public-private partnership. I think this organization, this group, Gerard, this BMM, and I think everyone should get a hold of that, to be honest, because this is a kickstart to understanding how you implement this technology in the grand scheme of things for the benefit of life, for the benefit of all of us, business and technology and people. Then you have access to medicine, which I think you talked about and a few of my colleagues. And yesterday someone talked about leadership and governance. I think you, Heather, during our meeting, you talk about policies and you talk about governance. I think that was a very important point to bring through. So overall, from that infrastructure knowledge that tech people know about, people, process, technology, if you unpack it, you will see that these 6 components can drop right in very beautifully to implement a resilient system and a secure system. Okay?
Interesting, yeah.
Thank you.
Heather, anything to add, especially on that leadership and governance component, which it seems like everything else trickles down from that.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to double click on that idea.
Thank
you, Ellen. So if we think about one of the core functions of blockchain technology being the availability of computational governance, auditable governance, and adaptable governance, for a system to be resilient, it must have enacted a governance framework that itself can adapt and can implement new rule sets and approve new rule sets. Again, we were talking about a moment ago, abstracting workflow rules, compliance rules, et cetera, out of single enterprises and single agencies up into a new infrastructure that's mutualized and federated. Well, that has to be governed, and all of the decision-making, we do not wish to automate. We don't want to hand over human governance systems to artificial intelligences. We want to be assisted and supported by AIs, just as do physicians clinically wish to be assisted but not overtaken. So the opportunity for that is absolutely already with us technologically. How do we design that system together through being convened in working groups such as what the Government Blockchain Association is doing here. It's us together who need to design how to use these technologies that are now quite ready. They're there. So I think that's key. One other piece, Ellen, you made another really insightful remark about edge devices. Exactly. And I'd like to just remind everyone that as the primary site of care is moving outside of the clinic and the hospital, and we're looking at every conceivable kind of consumer and medical product being deployed at the edge, right now, our system does not have a trusted device identity or control layer. We do not have trusted data transport. We have a widely acknowledged profound security vulnerability comprehensively across the board on those devices and the transport and the data and everything to do with them. Then, aside from the security, we are not able to actually activate or use an enormous amount of highly valuable edge data. And so thinking about that what we're governing, we need to change our mental model from our accidental orientation around the built environment in healthcare, realizing that we know healthcare is happening on the curbside, in the street, in the community, and not only in hospitals and clinics, and that we know social determinants are far more predictive of health outcomes than are anything that happens in our healthcare system. So when we think about the edge, we are also thinking about people and families and communities. And that means some very, very important things to all of the themes that my esteemed co-panelists have brought up about what resilience means.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Yeah, and Heather and Ellen, the two of you just like unleashed a whole host of things we could go on and on forever about, but it even touches like in the 6 components that we've identified that are important to be appropriately managed. Pradeep had said earlier, and Frank echoed, patient access is crucially important. Heather, you were touching in leadership and governance that improper or incorrect leadership and governance can affect accurate and secure health information systems and the distribution of devices and so on and so on. Frank, Pradeep, jump ball. You guys have anything to add to those 6?
I would like to add something.
Yeah.
I think we can build a really, really secure silo. I can build a concrete wall around your data. Nobody will get in, nobody will get out. The problem is that you can't build silos and deliver any value. So in healthcare, we can strengthen the security to a point where no one can penetrate it, but then neither can you, the one who needs to access it. And the more we secure an institution, the more we turn them into a silo. And then we say, well, we have a very resilient, unbreakable, nuclear-proof silo, but it's not useful because no doctor can penetrate it, nor can a patient. So our problem here is we have to balance. Interoperability between organizations is the foundation of healthcare. Between institutions, between patient, between doctor, with specialists, with pharmacists, with lab, with the employer, with your TPA, with your government agency, your Medicaid, whatever, NHS. So here is our challenge. We can build very resilient systems in isolation. How do you build them in collaboration where they interoperate? So what Heather talked about, which I totally agree with, we need flexibility. When you drop a bowl of glass, it shatters. It's not flexible. You drop a rubber ball, it bounces back. Why? What's the difference? The physics of that is that the rubber flexes and the glass doesn't. So we need to, if you're going to talk about resiliency, you have to talk about interoperable systems that are microcosms of healthcare delivery that are tied into a flexible fabric. Because you can have single node fail. Guys, things happen. In some part of the world right now, hospitals are being bombed out of existence. They could have been the most resilient system, but they don't exist anymore. So you need to replace that loss of supply with another supply. And that has to be a different mode of supply, right? You can have a pharmacy go out of business. You can have a pharmacy chain go out of business. You can have a Blue Cross system collapse because of flooding in the plains. Been there, done all of that, what I'm describing. So resiliency comes from thinking of healthcare as a fabric. And if a single node fails, a single node fails. If half the fabric fails, the other half still works. This is point number one. Point number two is the fabric has to rebalance. Just because I have huge demand on one side and huge oversupply on the other, the fabric needs to rebalance. Otherwise, it's useless again. Here's oversupply happening, and the fabric can serve it, and here I have massive capacity sitting, and I can deliver it to anybody. Economically, it won't work, and you will also have a fragile system. So the interoperability between healthcare, and this is where blockchain or technologies like blockchain, where you can think of every participant in the network as a node in the fabric who can access every other node, but they can also fail without killing the whole system. And that's how you achieve resiliency. Because you cannot duplicate, triplicate. Look, at Blue Cross, where I was CIO, we had 3 data centers, right? So that we had enough resiliency. We were solid. We had all the ITIL, the ITIL processes in place. I had thousands of people working to build. And then came the floods, and all 3 data centers flooded. So much for resiliency, right? Then you can say, well, I'm going to put it on the cloud. Well, that's just another abstraction of your if all you're doing is pushing the risk forward, you're saying, well, if it's out of sight, out of mind, it probably doesn't exist. It's an ostrich behavior. That's not really right. So if you really want to talk about global resiliency, you've got to talk about the ability for nodes to fail and for other nodes to pick up that demand-supply imbalance. And COVID demonstrated that for us. If our regional hospital went out of business, oops, I have nowhere to go. And recently I was and last anecdote, very pertinent, I was in Ukraine about 3 weeks ago, and I met with the mayor of a city. And he walked me through a regional hospital, which is devastated. I mean, the windows are blown out, floors are, the roof is gone, it's been missiled, it's dead. But that's the hospital that served 1.2 million people. Huh. What's your resiliency model here? The only other the model we need here is that there needed to be a whole host of physicians around the world who could pick up the slack. And for that, you need a fabric. For that, you need people to leave, and that's the last piece of resilient models. Your role on that resilient model must be both elective, and you should be able to depart the system. You cannot be locked into the system. I can join the system, I can deliver a service, I can get out because I'm done. So these things, Heather talked about adaptable. I think of them as more like a mesh that flexes with time. I'm a physics buff, so I love these analogies of time-space continuum, and it's a fabric that we all bounce off on. That's what a time is. Right. But the point here is healthcare is all ultimately about ability to deliver timely care to the patient who needs it. And there's always suffers from demand-supply problem. You have regional hospitals that have understaffed, overly demand situation. Then you have a metropolitan hospital that have massive amount of demand and perhaps not enough supply. You have all these issues. And you can't solve them with just infrastructure unless your infrastructure flexes. And who are the people going to flex it? You and I, which means we have to participate in the network and get out when we don't need it.
Yeah, I want to switch gears because we're kind of painting a semi-dire picture of the current state of healthcare where you're going to go to the doctor and you're going to go to the doctor. So Frank, I want to start with you because the reason that we're all here and participating in this GBA event is that we're enthusiasts, we're technologists, we're thinkers around blockchain. Frank, from your perspective, how could blockchain technology be useful in creating or contributing to the resilience of health systems?
Well, thanks for the softball question. I appreciate that.
It's the question you were born to answer.
Well, I'm going to tie in a few things that were said earlier. I mean, we had a lot of conversations about digital identity.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the ultimate goal in the healthcare space is get the person-centric healthcare, right? Make it about a population of one. and how I engage with that one, be it precision medicine, edge diagnostic, whatever it happens to be. It's population one. The current systems, I don't care if you're here or around the world, are still geared to encounter mechanisms, right? Patient encounter. I'm sick, I'm going to the doc, or, you know, it's about kind of playing the law of averages and you know, making that relationship between the payer and the provider more efficient. The patient just is kind of an afterthought, more or less, right? Don't take that as a general statement in terms of how all the current systems work and how they're structured. Even all the EMR systems is about, I'm going to deliver service, but then how am I going to get paid? Right? So if you go back to this notion of identity or our own digital selves and digital personas, which is where all this metaverse is going, who's going to own that? You know, we should own that. So let's start there and kind of work back. What are the three fundamental problems that we see? And I'm going to attack this from a data perspective. Is one, there's an explosion of data. We all understand that. 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced every year, 2.5. So that's billions, million. So whatever, it's big, right? And about 30% of that is health-related data. Unfortunately, too much of that data is focused on compliance and not improving care. And so what happens is we see now this whole industry of data brokers emerge that create billions and billions of dollars in market cap, but don't really help us any. Might help the pharma industry make more money, but they're not helping us. The second aspect to life is, when we talk about this data explosion, is you know, the fact is our data is being abused. You know, I mentioned it a bit ago, but you know, health data is one of the most valuable pieces of data on the planet. Hackers focus on it. You see all these ransomware attacks, but also in terms of data about us is being used in ways to help other things get monetized and not necessarily improve our health. So I think we got to deal with that. And then the third aspect, and now I'm going to draw a blank, right? So you know, data abundance in terms of our data is being abused, and now we have to deal with just general access again, right? So when you take a step back and say, where does blockchain fit in all this and creating resilient infrastructures? One, I think you can transfer this to truly a person-centric model if we're able to own and control our data. So what's our challenge? We're challenged to create a world of connected data where my individual rights and data ownerships are respected, that we have shared incentive models, and there's a trust fabric underneath to allow us to interconnect and deal with somebody on the other end. And I don't care if that's me going to a new doctor and sharing my data, or if I'm in a virtual situation, or me as an extension of myself and my own digital DNA, being able to use that to help create my care pathways and help my pathways, or help build better health workforces. I know the third one now, I forgot, is intelligence is underused. How did I forget that? We spend too much time on the whole aspect of these super AIs and how they're going to kill the world. But the reality is that we're not going to mint enough healthcare professionals to deal with everybody on a personal basis. So it's going to be an augmented world. And how do we do that? How do we do that in bleeding more intelligence out of the data to build a healthier life, to build a everyday, all the time engagement model? All these things are part of blockchain. And I know they've been theoretical and people say, hey, we need to do this. But we've been actually doing it. We've been doing it with pharma, in the pharma space. We've been doing it in unifying data across lots of data sources and state data exchanges. All this is very possible to create this resilient fabric, but it starts at that level. I mean, there is no such thing as pure perimeter security. So being a cybersecurity guy a long time, when you take pure perimeter security, I'm going to echo what Pradeep said, you lock yourself away, great, nice. So Gartner has this whole market called privacy enhanced tech. You know, interesting in that they don't talk about blockchain. It's interesting, fact. And so privacy enhanced tech is, how do I protect data? How do I build little data silos? How, you know, this is encryption, this data access and privacy enhanced computation, federated learning, and all the things in terms of computational methods. But where is the fundamental aspect of making data smarter? I mean, because it truly is, health is truly a distributed environment, right? We're never going to consolidate it. Government's not going to build one big database. You know, the resilient in the fabric means I'm in and out, just like Pradeep says, that it goes with me. It adapts, my data adapts with me in my different service models. That's really the fundamental change we need to see, because then it will drive costs down, it will drive access up, and it will drive this broader aspect of health inclusion. It will definitely broaden that sphere. So, blockchain is that last piece. So in Gartner's model, privacy-enhanced tech, privacy-enhanced computational, blockchain can create privacy-enhanced data. And I'm not talking about, just storing data somewhere else and accessing it. It actually is using blockchain methods, because blockchain is a method. It's a way of doing things. It's not just a ledger. It's a way of doing things cryptography-wise to establish trust in a trustless way. I mean, that sounds kind of oxymoron, doesn't it? But that's where it fits. That's where it fits. And, and at some point, you're all going to have your own digital persona, whether it's health or whether I'm using it shopping or whatever. You should own it. And you should use it to live a better life. And that's the path that blockchain's taking us. That's the path that Web3 is taking us, to where that distributed governance model is us. And we don't have to wait. I mean, we can do Web 2.5 right now. We do it right now. So, and there's active use cases. Wendy, raise your hand, and I'm going to shut up. So Wendy is our Chief Scientific Officer, just wrote a book called Blockchain in Life Science, has a lot of practical approaches to implementing blockchain in life science, and by extension in the health space. What health hasn't done, though, is we haven't got on the crypto craze, right? What's the economic model in the crypto craze? But who cares, right? We're through the hype cycle. We're in the early stages of the adoption and maturity cycle, and now that's us to implement on a broader basis real practical use cases. And we got a list of them, and I'm sure other people have a list of them. So it's going to take us all, right? The fabric is all of us. It's not one company. I don't want a health meta. Sorry.
Yeah. Hey, and that sounds like a call to action for collaboration between organizations trying to solve for the same challenges. Briefly, because they're going to give us the hook in a little bit, because this really should be a healthcare conversation for all day, but just one or two real quick questions. Heather, did you have anything to add to maybe what you see as an efficiency that blockchain can bring to kind of solve this kerfuffle and where it's heading? I know that Equidium Health is working on a lot of really important initiatives. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Marquis. And I know we have to be quick. I want to first just say, Frank, amen to everything you had to say. Just, you are so spot on in my opinion. I'd like to double click on a theme that you brought up about making data smarter and AI and the convergence there. So there is a if you're not from the healthcare and life sciences industry, and I imagine, how many people are from the healthcare and life sciences industry in the room? Okay, so a tiny minority of you.
Yeah.
You may be unaware that there is a very, very big problem about artificial intelligences that have been trained and deployed into production throughout our health system on data that is not representative of the total population that the AI is intended to serve, and then deployed without clinical validation. And it sounds maybe shocking that would be the case. It was an accidental, inadvertent factor. But it's been well established that multiple artificial intelligences acting in our health system today can, in fact, unfortunately, further institutional racism, all kinds of bias. Realize you're training artificial intelligences on data that underrepresents vulnerable populations in many categories. There is no possibility, there's no computer science magic that can fix the absence of core data to train AIs. This implicates a new way that needs to be found to access vulnerable populations and engage them, and new mechanics that need to be put in place to retrain models that we know today are not producing generalizable results, and retrain them in a way that results in trusted, ethical, and explainable AIs, then deployable on infrastructures that can provide appropriate controls and adaptive, flexible governance. And these right now, today, there is not a clear pathway on what you would do about that problem. But we, myself and others and partners and colleagues, see a vision for blockchain technology in healthcare that can address that rapidly.
Good. All right, in closing, just one more question. 1 or 2 sentences, everybody. We'll do round robin.
Too big to pull off.
He could pull me off. Maybe. That's right. Right, really quick, I want to kind of get the altar call out of the way. In one or two concise sentences, what message would you like to leave, not only with regulatory and compliance policymakers, but with aficionados of blockchain, the inventors that are in the room, about the importance of blockchain technology in creating resilient and secure health systems, and how everybody can get involved to move the innovation forward. Pradeep, just one or two words.
So I think building upon the theme of resiliency, in my mind, blockchain will inevitably lead to, or should lead to, fabrics that we can participate in at will. Patients and doctors and all care providers, nurses, pharmacists, can join and leave that network based on their will and need, will give us better resiliency than any more silos that we can conjure up today.
Thanks, yeah. Frank, what do you think?
Oh, I think it's all about collaboration. I mean,
Agree.
we have multiple dimensions as people, our financial, our health, style of life, where we live. All those things kind of go together, and we see this convergence in the blockchain space on how to build on the fundamental protocols that have been successful and add to them to create solutions. And I think it's solutions around a person, and that being, let's collaborate on what that person identity looks like and is transportable across that fabric.
Thanks, Frank. Ellen, what's your last word?
Sure. We need to have a public-private partnership, a real one, such as a private partnership like this organization. There are so many very smart people that are part of the GBA group. We can use the GBA as a vehicle, as a conduit to partner with government. We need preparedness. We need to have early warning signs as to some of the problems that might come up down the road, i.e. COVID or any other diseases that might be global. We need real-time surveillance. We talk about technology. We need adapting the new technology. We need investment in new implementation of technology. And the way we do that, who has the biggest buck, is government, partnering with us in this room to make things move forward. This organization is the best, in my opinion, and I've been all over the world. I've been to South Africa, Copenhagen, Milan, everywhere, and I see that government, with the help of a group like this, like the European Blockchain Summit, this group is the right place to be able to help government to move this forward and fast.
Yeah,
Thank
agreed.
you.
And Ellen could have started with the money, right? Heather, one or two words.
You got it. So I think coming back to first principles, we're talking about a new class of shared infrastructure that cannot be owned, funded, overseen, controlled, secured by any one party, public or private. Underscoring the necessity for new classes of public-private partnership, I'd like to make the point that until we have the governance framework for how these will be underwritten, who writes the insurance liability protocol, for example. You know, so every aspect of its financial, legal, bioethical, compliance, operational risk, it is critical infrastructure. It needs nation-state level cybersecurity defense. Until that governance approach is worked out, we don't have technological problems, we have structural problems. So thank you for being here to collaborate on those kinds of problems.
Very good, yeah. Thank you. Dr. Zach, I had a bunch of questions for you. I'm sorry we don't have time to get to it, but just one or two words.
Well, we need to change the narrative. The narrative right now on the end user end is that blockchain is a hammer to pound every nail, and it needs to be more like an adjustable wrench or like a rubber ball.
An adjustable rubber wrench.
That's right. And we need to change this narrative. And how do we do this? It's through mentoring, training, and partnering, and running tests and experiments, and actually doing the work, showing that it works. Give the end users something they could grasp visually, okay? Do something, experiment, get results, and compare it to what's being done now. And I think that's how we could
I
quantify
agree.
this.
Thanks. That's a really appropriate way to close this out. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to talk to all of the panelists when you see them out in the hall. They've got a lot of information to download, and I'm sure with all of the talent that we have in the room, we have a lot of room for collaboration and synergies. So, thank you. Thank you, panel.